So here we are at part 4 of our series on the 5 perceptions. So just a real brief recap before we get into today. The first perception that we had was the physical perception. And if you notice on this graph, it's huge. It's expanded. It goes everywhere. It is the things that we can sense with our physical being: touch, feel, smell, taste, sight. Nothing wrong with perceiving life that way. We were put here, as spiritual beings living a human experience. We were supposed to feel these things. So do not see any of these as right or wrong. I'm presenting this because I want you to know that you have options on how to see things. So anyway, that's the physical perception, briefly. The next one is the mental perception. You notice it's a little bit narrower because the mental perception starts leading you into a different way of perceiving. Now, it's really hard to have the physical without the mental, because if you see something, you think about it. If you taste something, you think about it. If you feel something, you think about it. There's not too many people on this earth that have a physical sensation that a thought doesn't accompany it. Now, there are some unconscious, subconscious thoughts that go along with it that we may not be aware of, but for the most part, the biggest majority, we think about what we physically experience. When we think about it, we do have choices then. We can change our thoughts about things and change our perception about things, change our understanding of things through our thoughts. Now notice this is a little bit narrower, and it's for a reason. And you'll see it on the next slide, which we talked about the last time we were together. What was that, 2 weeks ago? The metaphysical perception. Metaphysical perception is, to me, the more I study this, the more it feels like a bridge. All 3 of these have to do with this human experience. We see, feel, touch, taste, hear, smell things, and then we think about it. And at that point we have an option. We can move to the metaphysical, which is a bridge almost to what we're going to be talking about today, which is the spiritual. It's kind of a bridge between the physical experience and the spiritual experience. Metaphysical allows us to look beyond what we're physically capable of dealing with on those 5 levels, those 5 senses. We can see, one of the biggest things going on in the world right now are all the fires out in the west and in Colorado. We really can look at that with human eyes, and we can see just how horrible it is, and I'm not going to say that it's not. I'm not going to take anything away from that, because there are some things out there that are just devastating. Somewhere in all of this, there is a higher good happening. The metaphysical helps us get there. And I'm not going to pretend to tell you at this point that I know what that highest good is. I don't. I mean, I can imagine some things, but I'm not going to try to sway you to what my imaginings bring forward. And those imaginings come when I look at it through the metaphysical perception. When we move into the spiritual perception, and even further into that 5th one that we're going to talk about, the highest good in that situation starts becoming very clear. So as you notice, our focus all starts looking, instead of way out here like it's tempting to do with the physical, it starts moving in. Our focus and our perception starts moving back into our heart. It moves into that connection between mind and heart. Greg Braden, one of my favorite teachers, has a word for that. I call it wholeheartedness. and he's got a different phrase for it, which I love, but for whatever reason it's blank today. But coherence, heart-mind coherence. Yeah, I think that came from heart math. Yeah, whatever you call it, when you have your mind and your heart working together, you find a harmony, and in that harmony, you can start bringing things back in. And in here is where we are one with God. In here is where we have our spiritual connection. In here is where we start seeing truth, and our perception shifts. Like I said, the metaphysical is just it's a bridge that allows us to see beyond this physical perception and into the spiritual perception. It allows us to connect with the omniscience of God. It's still kind of on the physical plane because it has to start with a thought. We have to consciously think our way through it. Metaphysical is not something magic. I remember when I first started this journey, when people started talking metaphysical, I'm thinking one of the first things that came to mind was a gypsy way of thinking, and I don't know why that came to mind, but that's what happened. And then it became, metaphysical is all for the people, the psychics and the tarot card readers and all of that, everybody could do that kind of stuff. It's not. Metaphysical is thinking beyond. It starts with a thought and moves beyond what our physical body can do. So now we move to the spiritual. This is the divine perception. Now for us in these human bodies, we kind of have to go through physical, mental, metaphysical, and then into the spiritual. Our perceptions on that physical level not only dictate our perceptions of life in this experience, but they also dictate our identity. They dictate how we identify ourselves. So if we're stuck down here in this physical level, we're going to identify ourselves based on what we see, hear, touch, smell, feel. I think that was 5. It's pretty limiting. So last week I was sick. If I base my identity solely on what's going on in the physical perception, then I see myself as a sick being. It's very difficult to get beyond that if I see things only on that physical level. When I move into the mental, it could get a little bit better, but still, if I'm thinking only about the sickness, then I have a very poor identity, self-identity. Moving into the metaphysical, I can see beyond that. I can see beyond that. Okay, there's something more to this. This body is ill, but my truth is not. And when I get into the spiritual, it moves away from a thought or a feeling into a knowing. I know that I am this spiritual being. And whatever's going on with this body is just the experience that I am traveling through at that moment. The metaphysical is extremely important because as this human being, this human experience, our sensory input from our birth to present, to this present moment, explains much of our experience of life, explains much of our identity. The combination of genetics, gender, age, race, education, culture, and a lifetime of experience make a pretty good case for summarizing ourselves as what we experienced. So this is all a case for looking beyond, a case for walking through this. This all started out, as I told you at the beginning, and let me get back over here so I can read it. It all started out with what Jesus was talking about, going through the narrow gate. As we move through these different perceptions, notice things are getting more narrow, they're more focused, they're more turned to truth, more turned to our spiritual being. That wide gate is if we keep perceiving this world, ourselves, all that's going on, if we keep perceiving that through the physical, it's that wide gate. But as we bring things in, we start coming into truth. We start seeing beyond. And while we are truly seeing more, it's bringing the focus in to one common theme, and that is our oneness with God. As one with God, can you truly perceive an illness of this body as your truth? Can you see all that's going on in this world as your truth? Everything that's happening around us, when we get into this spiritual perception, we can see that everything that's happening around us is an opportunity for us to see beyond. It's an opportunity. Jesus taught in parables. And I truly believe that that happened because that's to teach us that no matter what we see, there's more. We can look at these fires and we can see fire burning millions of acres. But there's something more happening here. And that's what my goal is. My goal is to get into this spiritual perception and find that more. Not there yet. I think I am in a spiritual perception in that I'm looking at it from that place. I'm not sure what the answer is yet, except maybe my goodness, my kindness, my love, my peace, my prayer contributes some way to the healing that is needed in that fire. As we talked about earlier, when I turn everything over to highest good, when I turn everything over to God and quit trying to control my participation, quit trying to control my contribution, when I let go of control, things happen. And that may be what this spiritual perception is all about in that instance. I know it is in many other instances. As you can see, there's really only just a fine line between each one of these, and they all blend together. It's almost like a path. It's a journey. And I think that's what this life is all about. As spiritual beings, as a spiritual being, you think about that. I mean, you think of angels, you think of God, you think of the Christ. The perfection in that existence has to be absolutely incredible. And knowing that we're spiritual beings that came here into this human experience by choice, there was something pretty enticing to get us to choose that, to leave perfection and have this. So how can this world truly be as bad as we make it out to be a lot of times? That's why we've got to look at these perceptions. That's why we've got to look at life, look at this world, look at other people with this spiritual perception. It's real fun when somebody tries to draw you in to an argument or a fight or something else, and you can look at the good in them. Because they don't know what's going on. But you can see the good in them instead of what they're trying to draw you into. And what they're trying to draw you into ends pretty quick when you do this. The spiritual connection is consciously choosing goodness and love and peace, kindness. And in my opinion, that all adds up to fun. The spiritual perception opens you to the next perception that we're going to be talking about. The spiritual perception is the light of God. And when we perceive through this light, we honor the expression of God in everything that is going on. If we are to believe that God is omnipresent, that God is in everything, in every person, then everything we witness is an expression of God to some extent. Everything. It's real easy to say, well, that guy is a jerk, so I'm just going to believe that's not an expression of God. Then he's not omnipresent. In this spiritual perception, we're able to see everything as an expression of God. Doesn't mean it's going to be something that we like in this human belief system. But it does mean there's something there to see from our spiritual eyes that will open us to broaden our understanding, to broaden our love, to broaden our experience. If you would like to spend more time in this spiritual perception, tune into what you focus on. If you want to spend an afternoon watching, I don't even remember the name of it, that MMA fighting, you're going to have one perception of the world. But if you spend your afternoon reading a book that opens you to a spiritual thought, you're going to move closer. I'm not saying don't watch MMA fighting. I don't personally like it, but you know, if somebody does. It's pretty popular. But I'm not saying deny yourself of some of these other human experiences, but add to your experience something of a spiritual nature. Something that draws your attention and your focus into your spiritual oneness with God. Read a book. Open your awareness. And the more you do that, the easier it is to start seeing these happenings in the world through eyes of love, through eyes of God. The more we move into this spiritual perception, the dimmer fear becomes. The further away confusion moves. As we open our spiritual perception and we start focusing through the eyes of God, as we start seeing God in everything, God in every situation, every experience, every action. Even if we don't understand it, if we just know that God is expressing, it becomes easier and easier to be in spiritual perception. And then go back and find one of our videos about spiritual healing, which we talked a little bit about earlier today. We're not going to get into that now for time's sake. But we have talked about it on other videos, and we'll probably bring it back to spiritual healing. There's a way to heal your entire being. And you don't always have to have the doctor. Sometimes the doctor is that physical or mental step that's needed to move into the metaphysical and the spiritual. So I'm not saying stop going to the doctor. I do not hear that. is a process. We have this physical experience that moves into the mental, that we can take it and notice this. The physical moves into the mental, and then we have a choice. We can take it to the metaphysical. This is where we have to choose. And then from there we can move into the spiritual. The perception of this world and the life of ourselves is changed forever. So let's pray. Father God, thank you for this ability. Thank you for this truth that we are spiritual beings having this incredible human experience. At some point along the way, we somehow turned it around and thought it was a human experience trying to get back to spiritual. Show us how to release that illusion and move back into our truth. Spend this experience of life, to spend it and see it and perceive it from our spiritual truth. Show us how to do that and release us from the illusions, from the judgment, the fear, anything that blocks us from being fully in our spiritual element. Knowing that this prayer is already made manifest, we simply say, thank you, Father, Mother, God. Amen.